Alright, so in this video we're gonna be talking about the PirateSoftware situation regarding the Stop Killing Games movement. And in case you don't know, the Stop Killing Games movement was started by this YouTuber named Ross Scott, who runs the channel Accursed Farms. And the goal of this movement is basically, as the name suggests, to stop killing games. And what that means in this context is how in certain cases, video game publishers actually end up basically just completely shutting a game down when they're taking its servers down, right? So if this is an online service video game and it's running on servers, and eventually once, let's say, the game becomes old or something like that, once they're shutting the servers down, they just completely shut the whole game down, because the whole game was built so that it could only function by connecting to the official servers. And so at that point, the game's just gone basically. And even though, let's say, you're in a situation where you paid for that game, you spent your own money on that game, you just no longer have access to that game, right? You just can't play it anymore. And this is something that even affects a game that has like these single player based components to them. So for example, The Crew, which is a game we're going to be talking about more later in this video, right? Because The Crew is actually related to all of this. So for example, like in The Crew, you actually could play single player missions and this story campaign that the game had, right? So let's say if Ubisoft was like, hey, look, we're shutting the servers for this game down, it should have been something like, oh, now you won't be able to play with other people because the online component is gone. But then, they should have at least made it so that you could still play the single player portion. You could still play the game without the online aspects of it. But that's not what ended up happening, and the servers for The Crew were shut down and the whole game was just gone. You couldn't play it anymore. So the whole Stop Killing Games movement was created specifically for situations like these, and to prevent situations like these by creating laws that would actually then force video game publishers to make it so that the game doesn't become unplayable once the servers shut down. And basically this movement actually became pretty popular, especially after The Crew was shut down. But now the problem was that PirateSoftware was actually against this, and he was a critic of the movement for various reasons, mainly saying that it would burden indie developers because there would be all these like restrictions and requirements for putting a video game out. But because of PirateSoftware's opposition to this movement, he ended up getting a lot of backlash online. And keep in mind, I mentioned how the movement was actually very popular with people because of, the pro-consumer nature of it. That ended up leading to the movement actually getting the target amount of EU petition signatures, which was 1 million signatures. And as of the recording of this video, they've actually gone way past that. And now they have more than 1,168,000 signatures. So yeah, it's pretty insane. And then there's also a UK petition. And as of recording this video, that petition now has more than 163,000 signatures. And the goal here was actually only 100,000 signatures. So they've crossed that as well. And keep in mind, the more signatures they get for these petitions, the more likely it is that there would be actual laws created for preserving video games. And of course, it's not like it's guaranteed, but just the fact that there's so many signatures and there's just so much support, that's something that's really good for this movement. But do keep in mind, it's still encouraged that, people should still keep signing and, keep trying to promote this and keep trying to get other people to sign it. Because even though technically the goals have been reached in terms of how many signatures were needed, there's this problem that a lot of the signatures are gonna end up being considered invalid for various reasons. So because of that, you're gonna end up, losing a lot of those numbers. So it's best to actually go above the target. Now, before I continue, real quick, I just want to say that it would really help me out if you would subscribe to the channel, because I am trying to grow the channel, so more subscriptions always help with that. Now, back to the video. So basically, because of all the backlash that PirateSoftware was getting, he ended up just straight up quitting from working at Off-Brand Games, which was the video game publisher that he was working at. And so he put out this tweet, which reads, "I am no longer working at Off-Brand Games. People were attacking all of the games we were publishing and trying to mass review bomb them. You can dislike the things I say, but this kind of behavior is unhinged. Learned a lot there, accomplished a lot. Hope they succeed regardless. Love those dudes and loved working with them. Hope they keep cooking." Now, the tweet here says that people were actually mass review bombing the games that they were publishing. But the thing here is that there's this tweet by Mischief which actually debunks this. So it says, "None of Off-Brand Games' titles are getting review bombed. Ludwig and PirateSoftware are both blatantly lying to seemingly further slander the Stop Killing Games movement. Incredibly weird and manipulative behavior from the both of them here." Now, basically, it shows this screenshot down below where it shows that there's like mostly positive reviews. So it's not like there's this massive review bombing that's severe enough to the point where the actual rating of the game ends up becoming negative, which of course is really bad for any publisher, because then, whenever someone's taking a look at the game, they're gonna think like, oh, what a bad game, it has all these like negative reviews. And so, that's like the idea with the review bombing, it's to like ruin the reputation of the game, or, it's like this way of like targeting the people that published it or like created the game or something like that. Like maybe something wrong with the actual game itself that, people are really angry about. And so, with the whole situation of like PirateSoftware stepping down, it's one of those situations where, if there's one person within a team or an organization that's like under a lot of fire and, they're like getting a lot of backlash, then, in certain cases, like either the person themselves decides to step down or like, the people that they're working with in that organization or that team, they say, hey, you have to like leave because we don't want to be associated with you because, you're in this like really crazy situation. And, we don't want to be associated with that because that creates problems for the whole team or the whole organization or the whole project. And so, they don't want to like have the whole project get jeopardized because of that situation. And so, yeah, this is basically like one of those situations. And, he's stepping down. He's like, hey, this is creating problems for the entire publisher. So, I don't want that. So that's why I'm leaving. And, he mentions the review bombing. But then, of course, I just show you that tweet that said that, hey, that's not the case. And now, another crazy thing that ended up happening was that because of all the backlash that PirateSoftware was getting, he actually ended up getting swatted. And basically, getting swatted is like, someone who's angry at you and doesn't like you, then, straight up gives your information to law enforcement authorities, and, they make up like this fake story, basically. And so then the SWAT team shows up to your address. And so it's crazy stuff. And it's actually really dangerous because that whole situation can go really, really wrong. And now, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to be talking about the game The Crew. And so, in case you don't know, The Crew was this game published by Ubisoft. And it was this racing video game. And the cool thing about it was that it had a map of the United States that you could travel across and drive across. So that was really, really insane, having this huge map. And I myself actually played The Crew. I played it start to finish. I completed the story campaign. I bought a bunch of cars in the game and, customized them and all that. And keep in mind, the game actually came out quite a while ago. And so Ubisoft ended up shutting down the servers for the crew. Now, keep in mind, if this was just one of those situations where a game has this single player component to it and then, a multiplayer component to it, and then the servers get shut down, so then the multiplayer part of the game ends up being shut down, but you can still play the single player part, the offline part. Now, that's not what happened with the crew. What happened was that the whole game just became unplayable, because the way that the game was set up was that it could only work if you would connect to the servers. So, once the servers were shut down, that's it. Your access to the actual game itself was just gone now, which is insane, because it's not even like the crew was this free to play game. It wasn't. The crew was a paid game, so you would purchase it, unless maybe you got it for free through Xbox Live Gold or something like that. So yeah, overall that was just a really, really crazy situation. And since the crew was this really big game, especially when it came out, and it was published by Ubisoft, this massive publisher, which has franchises like Assassin's Creed. Because of that, people were like, dude, this is absolutely insane. In fact, people were thinking dude, wait a second, is this even legal? Right? And so that actually ended up really boosting the public support for the Stop Killing Games movement, shutting down the crew. And overall, it's really interesting to see that now, people are actually trying to push for actual laws that ensure that something like this can't happen again. Because if you take a look at books and movies and things like that, society overall and governments and the law, they've had time to actually deal with that kind of stuff and make a whole bunch of laws about it, right? But with video games, because the medium is way younger, I think a lot of those laws and regulations and things like that, they don't exist yet. And so it's gonna take some time for these things to actually be created and to really decide, what's considered right and wrong in terms of what publishers can do, what they can't do, and how to manage a video game once you've sold it. Because a video game is more complex than something like a book or a movie. With a book, it's just oh yeah, you bought it, you just have it. And with a movie, if you get a CD or something like that, it's okay, well, you bought it, now you just have it. But then with a video game, it's okay, with this online aspect to it, there are servers that need to be running in order for you to then connect to them and have access to those online parts of the video game. And of course it costs money to run those servers, right? So if a video game becomes really, really old and the numbers start to decrease, the player numbers start to decrease and stuff like that, then publishers do end up just shutting down servers. But the big problem here is that you have a video game in this case which was entirely online and based off of the server. So shutting down the server means shutting down the game. But then the crazy thing is that you've purchased the game, you bought it. And so you should have access to it even after the company shuts down servers, if the game has some kind of single player type functionality to it. So it's not the Crew is the kind of game where you absolutely need other people to be playing it with you for it to function. You can play it yourself as well. The game has a story mode. So yeah guys, those were just my thoughts on the situation, and now I'm interested in hearing what you think down in the comments below, so leave a comment letting me know what you think. And with all that being said guys, this is Alexi, signing out.